Obviously, Franco is disgraced and shouldn't be talked about.
Hello and welcome to Caged In Presents Coppola Connections, as always brought to you by the Breadcrumbs Collective and hosted by me, Petros Patsilivas. Here on this podcast, we watch every single film from the entire Coppola family filmography to determine, are they the greatest film family of all time? This is episode 33, and the film we are talking about this week is Gia Coppola's directorial debut, Palo Alto, and it feels like it's only right to give somewhat of a trigger warning and kind of content warning to this episode, because obviously we talk about James Franco. It was near on impossible to obviously talk about this film and the kind of ickiness around who James Franco is, the kind of appalling things he's done and the appalling person that he is. So yeah, this isn't like us fawning at the man or anything like that. I'm sure neither myself or Daisy would like to do that. We kind of hash out the James Franco of it all quite early on in the episode and then try and steer clear of talking about him. But obviously, like this film, the spectre of Franco looms over it altogether anyway. As is always the case, we will be going through some heavy spoilers in this chat. So this is your final warning to duck out of the episode now and watch the film. But I'm sure you would enjoy this episode all the same nonetheless. So with all of that out of the way, all that's left to do is to pack your car full of your buddies, get hopped up on booze and drugs, move from one party to the next bad decision as we make some Coppola connections. We're here to talk about Gia Coppola's directorial debut, Palo Alto, which premiered at the Telluride Film Festival in 2013 before getting a limited release in May 2014. Based on a collection of short stories by James Franco, boo, and adapted by Gia Coppola, yay! The film stars Emma Roberts, yay! James Franco, boo! Jack Kilmer, yay! Nat Wolff, yay! Well, this film is basically Nepotism the movie, but we'll get to that later. Joining me to decide if this film is a talented young artist of a film with potential and whether it alone makes the Coppola family the greatest film family of all time, or if it is a skeezy teacher of a film that will get you to babysit and then put on the moves, is somebody who's used to the IMDb's bottom 100 rather than a film festival navel-gazing darling. I'm thrilled to be joined by one half of the excellent W-rated podcast, Daisy Edwards. How are you, Daisy, and how does it feel to be released from the shackles of the bottom of the cinematic barrel?
Oh my God, it feels great. It feels like, do you know what? Don't give me this kind of power. Send me back because I'm too hyped to talk about something that isn't trash, because I love trash. But I've also been watching quite a lot of Razzie nominated films for our upcoming Razzie I was about to say season. I'm not doing a whole season. Our Razzie episode. So it was quite a nice break to watch something a little bit different. As you say, very navel gazing,
Yes.
Very indie darling. But it was nice to break it up, and I'm very excited to be here on the podcast for the first time.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a long time coming. I think this episode has kind of been
Oh my God, yes, sorry. I thought about that the other day.
No
a
worries.
year, I think, ago we were supposed to do this.
Yeah, it's like the Morbius of podcasts. It keeps moving around the release schedule, but we finally got here. So yeah, I'm glad we could be here. But before we get into talking about the Coppolas and this film, tell us a little bit about W-rated. What is it?
Yeah, sure. So it's our podcast with me and co-creator Claire. So we watched the bottom 100 on IMDb. You might have seen that list right next to the highest rated. Not sure how many clicks it gets in comparison. You know, quite a lot of people talk about the top 250, not so much the bottom 100, but that is, you know, a territory unexplored. So I was a bit of a masochist and morbidly curious. So I decided I was going to take it on at the beginning of last year, and Claire and I were talking about it on Twitter, and we decided that it had to be documented somewhere. So she came along for the ride. She told me that she could edit and do all of that jazz. So I was like, great, because I cannot do any of that. Now she does everything, and I turn up and we watch some really bad films together. So yeah, it's been great to explore. You know, some of them really do deserve it. Some of them, you know, it's just a pile on. So we're really getting to like the crux of like some really deep film criticism and like sort of film history and things like that now. So it's been really eye-opening, but also just a load of fun, and sometimes not very fun at all. So,
Well, yeah, because obviously this started off as a Nicolas Cage podcast, and he is one of 3 people, part of the unholy trinity, that has 3 films, I believe. I'm not sure. It's an ever-changing list, but at one point he had
it
3
is,
films on the
yeah.
bottom 100,
I
right?
know that we've done one of them, yeah, Left Behind, which is the apocalypse, end of times film that was.
Yes.
Oh, it was fun. It was fun because it was really bad. He played a character called Race Steele, and he was a pilot that had an affair. It was like, wow, this is everything I want and more. But I can't remember off the top of my head what the other ones were. I'm not sure if you remember.
So I want to say that it is The Wicker Man is on there, because I just think when that list was
You're right.
created, I think 2006 would have been definitely when people would have been at their height of kind of just reviewing stuff on there anyway. So I think
Yeah,
definitely
for
like
sure.
that's why that film, and it's a film that people just for some weird reason love to hate. I'm not sure if you can tell I'm vamping to try and find out what that third Nicolas
Yeah.
Cage film is on the bottom
While
100.
while you're looking for that, yeah, I completely forgot about The Wicker Man because so many people want to talk about it. We've kind of delayed it to try and like see how we can work on our schedule to try and sort of get everyone to talk about the films that they like. So we haven't yet got to that, but I haven't seen it and I am itching to watch it.
Well, that film may come up later in this conversation. Nicolas Cage only has 2 films on the bottom 100. So, yay, go Nick. What a good guy.
Good for him. Although my absolute worst film ever is a Nick Cage film. It might not be on the bottom 100, but it's on the Daisy bottom 1. And you've covered it already. Pay the Ghost.
Yes, Pay the Ghost is bad. Yeah, Pay the Ghost. Yeah. It's not one of his worst, and that's saying something. That's saying something to some of the other
Do you
films he's been in.
think?
I
Oh gosh.
yeah. I think I don't know.
It really is saying a lot.
Yeah, I think with that film, it's just that it's boring. It's really, really dull and boring. And like, there's worse films that are a lot more fun than that. Do you know what I mean? Like, incompetently made, but they're really fun. Whereas that one, I don't know, it's Nicolas Cage just going through the motions, and it's a real sorry, sad.
I feel like that's the real film sin.
Mhm.
If you make a film that's bad but it's not fun, then that's the cardinal sin
Yes,
of
definitely.
filmmaking. You ask
Definitely.
me.
And I'm sure there'll be films that you'll cover on your podcast that will just be like, there's no fun to be had in this whatsoever. Do you know what I mean? And then like I've had it on this podcast where it's like,
Yeah.
like I'm gonna have to find a way of, and normally everything gets talked around about the film apart from the actual film itself, and then you realize, like we're trying to avoid talking about the film because there's
Yeah.
nothing really to talk about because it's dull as dishwater.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the worst, definitely.
So let's find out what your Coppola connections are, Dave. Coppola connections? Coppola credentials I'm talking about right now.
Oh.
When did you first become aware of the Coppola family? And when I say that, like, I mean, like, not just that there's one member, but there's this whole kind of harem of a massive
the
spider's web.
depth and the depth and breadth and width. Well, to be honest with you, Petra's probably the full extent coming onto this podcast, because I really didn't know just how many people. I think, like, first off, like, knowing about Sophia, and then I'm like, oh, okay, related to Francis Ford, fine. And then the big revelation about Nick Cage. Everyone, I feel like everyone remembers where they were when, like, Michael Jackson died, and also where they were when they found out that Nick Cage was related to the Coppolas. Because it's just such a big deal. But yeah, I think probably around about like 5 or 6 years ago, maybe a bit longer, when I first started getting into like going to cinema on my own, just before I did like uni or after film production, and just kind of seeing people like reading reviews and them going, oh, of course, it's great because they're related to a Coppola. I'm like, how big is this family exactly? But yeah, as I say, full extent, did not know until today.
What are like are there any ones that surprise you, like people that you were aware of and then go, oh, they're related as well? I know that some people like see Jason Schwartzman, for instance.
For me, it's
like,
definitely.
How is he related? And then there's.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely Jason Schwartzman, because I think that was probably one of the most recent ones that I say realized sort of happened upon me, and I was like, oh, here goes another one. How many have they got? Sort of like, have they got just like a factory that they just keep like whizzing them out of?
Yeah, and then it's like you go back to why he got into film, and then even that whole story is like, oh, it wouldn't have happened if his family weren't in film. I think like Sophia knew Wes Anderson because of Spike Jones and stuff like that in the 90s. They were having a party at Francis's house. They're invited, Jason's there, and Wes Anderson goes, that's the kid I'm looking for Rushmore.
Amazing.
And then it's like, bang, that's Jason Schwartzman's whole career off the back of that.
But people kind of like,
that's why I get to talk about basically every Wes Anderson film on this podcast too.
People shit on it though, right? Obviously, the whole nepotism thing. But like, it's the same in every industry. Like, a lot of people wouldn't have the jobs that they had they not known or been the family. Like, you are who you know, and sorry if they're famous. There's not really much they could do about that. If their family are famous, of course they're going to meet other people in the industry.
Yeah, I find that funny. Like, people, when it is something like filmmaking or like the media in general, when there's nepotism, people have a massive issue with it. But like, won't have an issue with like, have you seen that? That builder employed his sons. What a prick! Do you know what I mean? It's called Johnson and Sons.
Brilliant.
Like that. Like, why didn't we give opportunities to other people in the community? Why has he employed his sons? Like and like a family business is seemed to be like a kind of a good thing in any other aspect. Do you know what I mean? If you're like, oh, we're gonna go to this restaurant. Oh, what is it? It's a nice family run place. You go, oh, I can't wait to go. Like, that's gonna be great. And it's like, oh, you gotta watch this film. Oh, like, who made it? Oh, well, it's the daughter of Steven Spielberg. It's starring the son of Val Kilmer. It's written by Stephen King's son, and all that stuff. People go, get away! It's disgusting. And yeah, I guess it's that thing. I don't know. Yeah, I've seen a lot of funny tweets about it and stuff like that at the moment, where it's
blowing
like,
up at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, even someone being like, don't trust a film writer whose parents names are blue on Wikipedia. It's like you really get a real insight to why they are where they are, or do you know what I mean? Any actor, it's like, oh, their parents are in blue. That's because
don't get me wrong. I feel like it's good to be aware of. It's good to be aware of that they probably got where they are through their connections, because I think there's definitely something to be said about how difficult it is to break into an industry like that, especially when you don't have anything on your side. But to sort of suggest that they shouldn't do it purely because it would be easier for them is just so bizarre.
Yeah, and it's that thing as well of, I guess, like, it would be hard, like, to grow up in that environment and not kind of
Mm.
by osmosis kind of be enamored
Yeah,
by that world. I don't know. Imagine like there are
definitely.
probably children of successful actors or directors and that who are kind of like growing up, they're just like, oh, that world just I find it
Yeah.
icky. Do you know what I mean? Like I want nothing to do with it
Mm.
whatsoever. Whereas like other
Yeah.
ones probably I don't know, if you're Sophia Coppola and you basically spent your childhood on the set of
On the set of
Apocalypse
Godfather.
Now, do you know what I mean? You're yeah, a set, yeah. If you're gonna be on The Godfather, yeah. If basically like because Winona Ryder has dropped out of a film, your dad is going, "You star in this film instead." Of course, you're probably gonna
Yeah.
go, yeah, I might make a film. My like favorite book's just been optioned. I'll try and see if I can write a script for the for the
Yeah.
Virgin Suicides. Yeah, why not? Yeah, so I don't know. It's a difficult conversation, I guess. I don't know. If
Of
you got
course, yeah.
problems,
Yeah, you probably write
you
essays
can reach
about
me
it, like
on Twitter, Instagram. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I don't know. I'm sure most people. Obviously, I speak for myself here, but like, if I had that opportunity, do you know what I mean? I wouldn't
Exactly.
think twice. Do you know what I mean? Like, I would be
Exactly.
like, oh,
Mhm.
what, Dad? Yeah, you're giving me opportunity to make a film. Lovely stuff. Yes, please. Like,
Mm.
or whatever I wanted to. Yeah, I'd be like, okay, yeah. I think the issue is when the people aren't good. I think that's when it falls down, right?
Yes, I was
Is
about to
if
say
like
that for
people get
sure. Because if they're clearly being employed purely because of their name and who they are, that's different, I think. I think, to, to punish them for having the connections they're born into and utilizing them I don't agree with. But yeah, if they're clearly just in it or taking up someone else's opportunity purely just because they've ridden the coattails of their family and not really done anything for themselves, then yeah, like totally agree.
yeah, and I guess it's probably got to be hard if you genuinely do have an actual passion for it as well. And then like you've got like you're beaten up by it from both sides. You've got this enormous pressure to live up to the name of whatever family member it is that you're living up to. And
For
also you've
sure.
kind of got the general public going, you don't deserve to be where you are. Like you need to prove not just maybe internal pressure you feel about living in that shadow. You also have the pressure from the
Hmm.
general public who feel like you don't deserve to be there anyway, that you're only there because of the amounting, do you know what I mean? This kind of the
Yeah,
behemoth that's in
for
front of
sure.
you. So it's like a kind of I don't know. I, there's probably people going, "Why the fuck are you empathizing for millionaires, Petra?" But fuck it, I do a podcast about the Coppolas. I've got to empathise with
Yeah.
them. I want to speak to
Read the
them one
room.
day. Yeah. So, have you ever met a Coppola? Have you ever? I don't know. Yeah. You do stuff in film. Have you ever been to a Q&A? I don't know. You ever been in the same room as Coppola?
No, unfortunately, I haven't. And just trying to think. I don't even think I've, off the top of my head, sort of been in any one degree of separation. Um, but how amazing would that be? I'm trying to think who it would be that I would want to meet. I mean, I'd want to see Nick Cage in the flesh just to see that he is a real human being. But in terms of
Mhm.
like speaking to, considering like from the films that I've seen of hers that I really love the style of, I'd probably want to interview Sophia Coppola. But I probably should watch more of her films before I say anything like that.
Yeah, I've got I don't know, I've got a real soft spot for Sophia, and I love her films. She's kind of yeah. Anytime like news breaks that one of them might be releasing a film, I'm kind of trying to put the feelers out, just going, could somebody somewhere please like give me a PR contact so I can try and speak to this person, even though I don't know, this podcast makes me sound like a fucking stalker to some degree. This next question feels a little redundant because it's what is the first Gia Coppola film you would have seen? But I'm assuming it would have been Palo Alto, right?
Mhm. Yeah, that's right. This is the first one. I think this might have been, because this is her first feature, right? I think. I think she's done shorts before, but
Yes.
Yeah. And I saw it in
Yeah.
2016. So yeah, this would have been the first one. I can't remember why or how or what drew me to watching it, but I guess it was out in 2016 as well. Oh no, it's out in 2013. Sorry, I misspoke. Maybe it was the Tumblr era of the time, and I'd seen so many things on Twitter and aesthetically pleasing screen caps that I decided to watch it. But yeah, I've racked my brains, and for the love of me, I cannot remember why I watched it, but I'm glad that I did, and I'm glad that I experienced it. So.
So yeah, what were your before we get deep into talking about Palo Alto, let's listen to the trailer.
Mr. B is a hottie. Too bad he wants to get it in with April.
No, he doesn't. Why would you say that?
Mr. Morrison, given the support you have from the community, the court would like to give you one last chance to turn your life around.
Try not to hang around Fred.
Dude, you can't be here. You just don't care about anything.
I wish I didn't care about anything.
This party sucks.
I'm older and I know that there aren't a lot of good things around. And I know that you are really good.
Why do you have to try so hard to seem crazy?
Do you even think she's pretty? She's pretty. I don't think she's that pretty.
I corrected your paper.
You could have just corrected it. You didn't have to rewrite the whole thing.
You're going down the tunnel of death. You're young. You don't know why you do things. But there's always a reason.
So before we get into talking about your first reaction to seeing this the first time and kind of your relationship to the film, I always like to ask my guests to give us a little synopsis of what this film is about. Daisy, go ahead.
Wow, that's a big question. That's a big question. What is this film about? I would say that this film is a slice of life of the Californian teenager through the perspective of someone who is in the Coppola family. And maybe hasn't experienced I say that I'm obviously from the UK. A lot of people have said that this is very much what being an American teenager in somewhere like California is. I don't know if it's maybe heightened maybe a tiny little bit, but essentially it follows I would say four main characters through don't even know timescale, maybe about 6 months. Very dreamy, very floaty, very, as I say, slice of life. Just these moments to moments, but it's just about these sort of pivotal things that happen to them that are quite dark and quite sad, and kind of how they just take it as that's life and they don't know any different. I'd say Emma Roberts is probably the main actress playing April, as you heard in the trailer. Speaking to James Franco, he plays her football coach, and their relationship, I guess, is probably, if you had to pick one of the main plot threads, but it is very much sort of, it's based on James Franco's stories, right? They're short stories, so I guess the way that they've done, I've not read them, so I don't know if they do interconnect anyway, or if that's done as part of the screenplay. But it's just about, their different experiences as teenagers in Palo Alto in California.
Well, yeah, you saying about the short stories, Gia picked the certain ones, which the short stories she picked from the book are Chinatown, Halloween, Emily, Jacko, April in 3 parts. They're the kind of they're the 5 stories she picked. And the reason she picked those was because they all had similarities, and some of them do intersect in the book. They do kind of overlap the stories, and in the kind of pre-production for this film, it's kind of weird, and hearing about it now, kind of, I don't know, you look at it in a different light, because it's James Franco like approached her about doing the film, and kind of like, I've got this book,
Okay.
and kind of like in a weird, like in a, I don't know, it could be a case that it was perfectly above board. Like, I guess like she's someone from a influential family, so he probably couldn't get away with the shit that he is. Let's be honest, has done elsewhere, and we'll get onto some of that later, because I think it's quite important to talk about, especially in relation to
Very
this film.
pertinent for this
But
film.
yeah, he approached her, and then like, yeah, she kind of went through and picked the stories. But she said she liked that there was similarities between those stories, and there's
So there was a running
yeah,
theme.
and from reading like some of the stories in the book, like I'm like, oh, I can see that element from that story, or that element, and they're like, so
Sure.
yeah, when she talks about Halloween, it's basically a story about, I guess it's some of it's melded into the Teddy character, where the story
Okay.
Halloween is basically Halloween night. A kid goes to a party, kind of splits off from the group, gets high and drunk, and then drives home and commits a hit and run on a woman, like not in a car, like actually runs over like a
Oh,
pedestrian,
wow.
and
Right.
then just drives off, and then it's him kind of coming back to town years later and kind of saying, I often forget about, I'm often sometimes reminded about like that night on Halloween when I ran over that woman. So like there's obviously elements of that in the Teddy story, and that character's
Sure.
on probation, I think, but then some elements of that you can see molded into the Fred character as well. So it's kind of, I think she's just cherry picked different like kind of flavors from the different stories to make this.
That's interesting, because it works, because I wouldn't have known that it was sort of a mishmash. I just assumed that was effectively, essentially, like, I didn't even really clarify in my head, are these all of these different character stories separate stories, or are they all just one short story that she's chosen? So that's interesting. I'm interested to read it now. I just don't want to give James Franco any of my money.
I bought the book from World of Books, so like somebody else has paid the money.
I'm looking for a reseller.
Yeah, somebody has paid the money to James Franco. I'm just paying that person. I don't know. Yeah, I feel dirty owning it. It's like I had all these intentions to read all of it, and then I was like on public transport and stuff like that. I was like, I can't pull out this book.
Oh yeah,
It's
yeah,
not on.
yeah.
It's not on Audible, so I can't listen to it. I have to try and read it, and I'm really bad at reading books.
Imagine if it was on Audible, but James Franco was reading it.
Oh.
Could you do it then?
I don't know. I reckon it probably was, and then they've taken it off.
You're so right. You're right.
So yeah, before we get a little deeper into the chat, I just wanted to run off some stats. So the budget for this film was $1 million, so not a lot of penny, but it only made a box office return of $1.2 million. So didn't really wash its face, but I don't think that's really the intention for this film, right? Like, I don't know, what were your initial thoughts when you first watched this back in 2016, if you can remember that far back?
I think I much preferred it then than I did now. That's not to say that it was bad. I just think I was much more affected by it. I watched it in 2016, so I would have been, God, I can't do maths all of a sudden. 22, I think. And I don't know, like I was a lot more sensitive to things like what I was sort of watching on screen and things like that, especially like not that long out of school and sixth form and uni, and that kind of community kind of feel, you know, with people like that. And I think a lot of the stuff that was quite dark really affected me in that way. So yeah, but it's interesting you said about making the money. It does feel like more of a, we just want to tell these stories. We want to play around with what it means to tell a story in this way. You know, it's James Franco's own stories and he's in it. And then obviously Gia Coppola's first film and she's part of this family. It kind of just felt like as you say, a bit of a navel gazing exercise we can do this, so why not? Let's tell these stories. Or let's get all these kids we know through the industry to be these, you know, good-looking teenagers who are demolishing themselves. And let's make it super, super pretty, and it will get tons of posts on Tumblr. So
yeah, shout out to Ariane Anaputri for saying that basically anyone between 2012 and 2016 has probably ingested this film via like Tumblr gifs and
maybe that's what it was. Maybe that's what it was, because I was an avid Tumblr user from maybe like 2008 or 9 until maybe 2013, 14. So this might have just been like the cusp of me stopping to use it, but seeing all of these gorgeous images. And look, I love an aesthetic film, but I think now that I'm much more time poor than I was nearly 6 years ago, you got to have some substance there underneath it for me to really feel moved by it now. Maybe that's why I felt it a little bit more vapid this time than I did the first time.
Well, I think to that point as well that like talking about like, do you want to? Should we jump into the James Franco of it all now?
Yeah.
Like just because it's kind of.
The elephant is in the room.
Yeah, it's very much in the room. Like, so obviously, yeah, James Franco has had a slew of allegations against him, which one being that he like created basically a film school, the Studio 4, and that like countless amounts of students have kind of came out with allegations that basically it was just an exercise for him and his kind of cohorts to use and abuse students to kind of get them to do basically like salacious performances and stuff like that, and they had to sign off their rights to the footage that was used for the short films they were making. And like I think I can say this with confidence that like he has had to pay out there's obviously some validity to it, because he's had to pay out over $2.2 million in reparations to people for what happened. Like
yeah, you'd take it to court if you weren't guilty, wouldn't you? And the thing is as well, I mean, that's a sweeping statement, but I think in this instance, but like when were these allegations come out? I'm intrigued in terms of the timeline of this film being released.
So the main allegations of James Franco, I think the kind of the thing that started the ball rolling of this kind of world of deceit and deception and kind of sleaze and skis that he had came out like the year after. Well, it would have been the year this film came out, like theatrically and kind of on home media. So
I wonder if that was a cause and effect. You know,
well, yeah, because
the flap of the butterfly's wings, people seeing him, that his stories, they cast him in that role, which we've alluded to is someone who grooms a teenager. Like, surely people would have gone, hold on a minute, he can't keep getting away with this.
Yeah, and I know, like, I would imagine like how flippant he was about it. So he his response to the initial scandal that happened with him regarding to texting a 17-year-old at the time when he was 35 years old, he tweeted out saying, all caps by the way as well, said, "I hope parents keep their teens away from me. Thank you." Which was his response.
That was his response.
Which kind of makes me feel like, I don't know, there was like a weird, I know that he thinks that he's a performance artist as well, that like he would have like almost orchestrated, like, because I think the girl in question, it wasn't illegal because it was something to do with like the state of New York or something like that, and the legal.
Because I think different states have 16 and 18 of what they class as consenting adults.
Yes.
It's kind of not the point though, right?
Yeah, 18 is the norm over there, and I think 17 is the state of New York where this happened. But it almost feels like he would have weirdly done it as like a kind of low, like really.
Didn't know, because he claimed that it was something to do with the role.
He claimed
right?
that it was like
Was
PR,
that him?
right? I believe. that it was PR
Yeah,
for this
yeah,
movie.
yeah, yeah. I remember
Yeah,
this
like
now.
that he was.
Oh, he's some sort of like normie Jared Leto, isn't he? It's like if Jared Leto was a jock, it would be James Franco.
Yes, he's kind of weird because he's had this kind of fascinating career of kind of like flirting with these kind of bro comedies, but then also trying to make these like weird art films. Whether it's a film he did called Interior Leather Bar, which is recreating deleted footage from William Friedkin's Cruising, which is a film all about
Yeah, I've heard.
yeah,
Yeah, I heard about that.
all
Yeah,
about Al Pacino kind of
weird.
infiltrating the
Yeah,
leather
yeah,
scene in LA and stuff like that. And
yeah.
so yeah, like in regards to the allegations, or there's kind of like like a few different things that kind of, when watching this film now, it kind of all it gives it a bit of an ick, right? There's a bit of an ick factor to the movie. And
For sure.
yeah, I think, like, I don't know, I wanted to I wanted to play this clip that I think will
Oh, go on. I'm
will
cringing already.
demonstrate what a bad guy James Franco is.
Horrible stuff that's going on. It's depressing and it's sad because obviously some of these people are very talented, and it's depressing that if they're predators, of course they have to go down. But I mean, it's fucking sad.
The bad stuff can happen on a movie as well. There's some people that go into this business because they got off in having power. And the most times they feel the most powerful, which is why they went into the business, is when they're making, and I mean hitting on, and don't necessarily, completely sexual on somebody that's underneath them. I mean, there are predators absolutely everywhere. There's stuff that happens on a set that can be really inappropriate. And there can be that type of predatory aspect on a set because you think, well, we're in the circus and we're on the road. So therefore, do the rules really apply? They don't really apply. There's the other aspect of it is that come try to get this job from me. You want me to give you a job? Come on, come prove to me that you want this job. That's a sin, and that's against the law, and that is a degree of harassment and predatory behavior that goes against an assumed code of ethics.
You will agree with that, James?
Yeah, if it changed it, yeah, of course.
That is from the Hollywood Reporter Roundtable, which was you would have the Sam Rockwell, Tom Hanks, I believe, Willem Dafoe was there as well.
That video deserves an Oscar. Like, I was going to bring this up, but I'm so glad that you actually played it in its entirety because I watched it on Twitter, and when the interviewer goes, James, and you see his face, honestly, like pure dopamine rush. Like, I felt like I could run a marathon after watching that. It was beautiful. The pure shock on his face that he was the one that had the question directed to him. He looked guilty.
Yeah, I think there's people who have claimed that like Tom Hanks did it on purpose. Like he kind of.
Oh my god! And I hope that he did. I hope that he did. Honestly.
So yeah, it's I don't know. It's kind of a weird place to start off this conversation, but it's definitely, we had to get the elephant out of the way and kind of I don't know, like we can kind of.
Because I think if it would just been him playing that role, but it's knowing that it was his story, and like I don't know, I would say, you don't know what the story was adapted from, but like the main plot point is that his character grooms a teenager, so it's like, well, you can't really have misinterpreted that in any way. So I think it's important to make that connection up front and say, hey, we are aware that this guy wrote this stuff and he's playing him, and he also did that stuff. So it is hard to get past that. For sure.
And it is that thing that he at some points has been a teacher, right? He taught at like universities and like the film programs and stuff like that. And as I said, he ran this film and acting school, Studio 4, that obviously like got closed down because of the kind of ill behavior he was committing. So like the parallels between him and the character of Mr. B are now kind of, I think, will forever kind of cast a shadow over this film in kind of how you
unfortunately
watch it. Like, do you know what I mean? And it's it's kind of a blessing that like he doesn't really get that much screen time, but I guess like the
you're right.
specter of him looms over the film, right? Because it's kind of like he gets top billing despite being like, as I said, like doesn't get the most screen time. He kind of, it's based on, do you know what I mean? It's based on stories that he wrote. It's, I think like in places it's like James Franco presents Gia Coppola's Palo Alto and stuff like that. So like,
yeah, I think it's the production company and James Franco present, or the other way around. I think he might have even put himself first. So yeah, it kind of says everything you need to know about him, really.
Well, yeah, that's that elephant ticked off the bloody list. We had to get there at some point. So let's talk about some like the storytelling in this film. How do you feel that like the kind of, because it is kind of meandering and kind of like, I don't know, there's would you say like what are the kind of main beats that propel this story forward for you? What are the things that stand out?
It's interesting because it is a tough one. It is one of those films where a lot of people be like, I don't get it, nothing happened. So you automatically think, well, no, it's a character study, right? It's saying something about, if it's not saying something through the plot, it's saying something through the characters. And I think that's a perfectly fine way to tell a story. In fact, I think that there's many, many benefits of telling a story that way. And I think sometimes I'm very much in the mood for those kinds of films. Obviously, I feel like maybe it's a bit harder to engage people sometimes. I think like, for example, something like Breaking Bad's The Fly episode, or Fly, is so divisive, because it's one of those moments that slows right down and, quote, nothing happens, quote. But I love it because it's telling me so much about the characters. And I think, in theory, that's what Palo Alto is trying to do. Unfortunately, I don't think it's actually telling us much about the characters at all. I think it's just a bit of a bit one-dimensional, and I think it's just a little bit too self-important. I don't think that the characters are really being shown as like, there doesn't seem to be a message behind it other than look at what these kids are doing.
Yes.
And we're going to like romanticize the fuck out of it, which will piss some people off, and other people will like it and be like, it's got a message. But for me, I'm a bit like, I don't know if Gia Coppola or James knew what their message was intended. Because, you know, everyone has their own perception. I just can't feel what they were trying to say about it necessarily.
Yeah, and I'm all for like kind of hangout movies and slice of life, like
I love mid-90s, if you've seen that. That's very much like that. Really, really affecting.
That's a really good touch point. And I think like films that kind of came before this that kind of could be touch points would be Larry Charles's Kids, like a film all about kind of New York street kids.
I haven't seen
It's a
that
very
one.
tough watch, but that is a film that kind of takes this idea of kind of just following this group of delinquent kids and kind of, but a bit more on the kind of lower class strata than these kids who are kind of.
I think that's the problem with this one, right? It is a little bit woe is me, middle class, privileged white kids. Which makes it a little bit harder to.
And I think that the character development and the kind of shifts in their kind of outlook on life are maybe like a little too subtle. It like, and don't get me wrong, it could be a lot worse if it's like all of a sudden Teddy has like a massive epiphany at the end. Like you get a little bit of that when he decides to get out of the car with Fred, and like I just wanted to play two clips back to back that kind of show that kind of subtlety, because they're two moments that mirror each other, but you kind of in their interaction they really tell you like that subtle change that Teddy has gone through throughout the film. And yeah, the first one is literally the opening moments of the film.
Teddy, if you're in the olden times, what would you do?
Which olden times?
Like King Arthur with knights and horses and shit.
I'd be the king.
No, you can't be king, dog.
No way. Dude, if I went back, I'd be the fucking king. I'd be the king.
And then the other comes like kind of nearer the closing of the film when the characters have kind of gone through everything they've gone through, and then kind of have basically the same conversation once again.
Hey, what would you do if you were an Egyptian? I'd be a pharaoh. Can't be a fucking pharaoh.
Why not?
Can't be a fucking pharaoh.
Why not?
I don't even want to be Egyptian anyways. All that sand and mummies and shit. So boring. Be an Aztec or a Mayan. And then fucking cut your heart out.
Hey, maybe we could cut Skull's heart out.
I think what you get from that is that like Teddy has kind of, I don't know, like mellowed ever so slightly, but again, it's not enough to think. Whereas Fred's character is kind of like ramping up, and it is that the film is left on a kind of cliffhanger of like he's going to go over he's on his way to going over the edge, and like what he does next is more terrifying. And it's kind of Teddy in a way, played by Jack Kilmer, has kind of he's had his teenage rebellion, right, and he's now kind of mellowed slightly, and that's the thing I think where this film falls down is he's got like some of these kids, they've got no reason to have these rebellions, like as we see with.
But that's a key part of the film, right? What they talk about, like when April's talking to Mr. B about her history homework, and she's very much like, you know, I don't know why any of these things happen. You know, why does anything happen? And they're sort of talking about how everything happens because of a reason. Like there's always a reason that people do stuff. She's like, well, I don't know why I do things. And he's like, that's because you're a kid or like a teenager or whatever. He said, oh, you're young, he says. I'm very careful not to say kid or teenager, obviously, given his position. But he said, that's because you're young, you don't understand it. And I think that's their message. That's what they were trying to do with this film, is that kids don't understand why they do the things they do, but they do them for a reason. And I do think that's really interesting. And I really don't think this film is bad by any means. I was just missing that moment. There just wasn't a moment that really gripped me. And I think in the first watch, it for me was the detailing about Emily's sexual assault that really got me. And the way that it was told and filmed just honestly made my stomach sink, and it was really, really hard to watch and hear, basically. But this time, because I knew it was coming and I was watching the characters a bit more carefully, there just wasn't that emotional impact. So it just kind of goes to show it was more of a shock value the first time around, rather than actually earned.
Yeah, I watched this film for the first time for this podcast record. And that scene, like, is I think it's tastefully done, and like Gia Coppola has said, like, she wants to incorporate that like element of like from the book, but like
without it being gratuitous and exploitative.
And I think that's the thing. Like, I think back to the fact that James Franco at one point was going to direct Zola, and like how that film. I'm not sure if you've seen you've seen that, the way that. Like
I haven't, but I know about it, and I've seen Spring Breakers, so I can kind of get the vibe of what maybe he might want to go.
So yeah, he like and stuff is handled in that film, especially in regards to sex work and kind of like stripping and stuff like that. I think it's done it in real safe hands in Jessica Bravo, whereas in his hands could have been done terribly. And I think like being in Gia Coppola's hands, being in a female director's hands, any moment that it could be salacious in any way is handled like I think beautifully. Like there's a moment when
the implied sex scene between April and Mr. B, I think, was handled super well, considering obviously like we know that Emma Roberts would have been of age at that time, but I think stuff like that being shown does make you uncomfortable when it's that kind of underage thing. So I think the way that they presented that was happening visually in an experiential way, I think, let's have way more of that, because what it leaves to the imagination can be so much more affecting than what's being shown, especially when it's a very sensitive topic.
And in those moments as well, like the way it's filmed is she is filmed almost like you could tell she's filmed without him there. So she's like, and it gets that kind of, it captures that detachment of, I guess, what a lot of like abuse survivors kind of feel when they're in those moments, when they kind of, they know something is wrong. And the way it's kind of shown on screen is, I think, great, because it's kind of these really beautifully framed shots and kind of just on her face, or kind of there's body parts and stuff like that. But it's just like, I don't know, it's almost like she's in this void of space, and it's just, you kind of just see her face.
Yeah. And it focuses on both the girls in that moment, not on their abuse, which is really interesting.
Yes, yeah.
And I think that's what is done both powerfully but sensitively. So it's really
because that Emily scene, like the way that is told as well, like with the kind of overlapping narration from Fred's character played by Nat, and it's kind of like all this kind of cascading information upon you, where it's like, there's a brown house, there's loads and it's like, but stuff is kind of coming in and that, like, and it's that thing as well, like, and there was an interview with Vice that Gia Coppola did. The interviewer asked, like, was that supposed to be intentionally, like, was that just a story? What, like, did that actually happen? Like, and it kind of, I don't know, it kind of I think that makes you feel even more uneasy, right? That like, like, why would a teenage boy, if that wasn't true, why would he be going around bragging about, like, it's disgusting that he'd be bragging about doing it anyway, but, or like telling that story, but the fact that if he didn't do it and he's kind of saying that story would be even worse.
It's interesting you bring that up, because I think that actually, and I always get like this, and Claire doesn't moan at me, but she makes me laugh, because she goes, you always increase your ratings of films when we've spoken about them on the podcast. I'm like, that's because I get into like hearing about the good stuff, and like really thinking about it. But I think the way that was done, with just like shots of Emily being playful and fun and flirty with Fred, and very like focused on her only, and in hearing Fred's detached voice in that way, not only could it be thought of, oh, is this true? Is he lying to? But that is how you hear about people's sexual assault from other people, and that's how it would have happened with teenagers. You hear from that person that hears from that person. You never see it. Like, these kids would never see that happened. They would just hear from their mate that happened, whether it was true or not.
And that scene kind of has like a button on the end of it that kind of really leaves like a kind of, you feeling icky. I didn't want to say foul taste in your mouth, because like with him, even though I've just said it anyway, that's going to make sense in a second, because it's him like pushing her down and saying, like, to give him a head in the back garden, saying like, tell me you love me. And it just like and I've got a hats off to Nat Wolff, who throughout this film plays an absolute piece of shit.
Skin crawlingly horrid, like awful.
Like he drops
and he seems like a nice boy.
He's a Nickelodeon kid, right? Him and Alex Wolff were...
Well, Alex has kind of taken over a little bit now, isn't he? He's been in a lot more stuff than Nat Wolff has. But I was going to look and see them when they were kids. When you see people, you're like, oh, I forgot what they looked like when they were kids, but they had their Nickelodeon face.
And I think his performance, because he has like moments throughout the film, whether it's like that kind of first interaction with Emily, like when he kind of goes over and steals the cigarette when she's smoking with Pam and stuff like that. And even the way like he talks to that Pam, and like he's always like calling people like bitches and whores. And I think this clip kind of encapsulates kind of how much of a dirtbag Fred is.
Not gonna work this time.
Emily, Chris, get in the fucking pool.
No!
Get in the fucking pool, Emily.
I'm not getting in the fucking pool!
Get in the pool! I've been excited about this! Just get in, okay?
Stop asking me! No!
Get in the pool, whore.
You'll be a real cunt, you know that? Just get in the fucking car! Okay?
You know what, Fred?
What?
I thought I loved you, but
What
you're
am I?
a real
What?
fucking
I'm a what?
douche.
I'm a
I think what is quite telling about that moment as well is when she says, "I'm not falling for this again." I think that like gives some validity to what we have heard earlier in the film of that story of what happened with Emily. Do you know what I mean? Like when she said, I thought I loved you," like, and I find her such a fascinating character, and she is pretty like, she is somebody who could be even more 2D than she already is, because she doesn't really get a lot to.
She doesn't get enough time, I don't think. I think her story would have really benefited from fleshing out more, and I think they could have used some of April's time that feels a bit wasted with Emily, because I think she's the most fascinating, because obviously like what we said about this being a slice of life of being an American teenager, and then also kind of like that message or theme of like, why do people do the things that they do? The main sort of running thread is like people is like love and trouble, which is what they kind of say in the trailer, right? People looking for love, people looking for trouble, whatever. So you have like Fred's character who clearly just wants attention, clearly wants love, isn't getting it. We do see his dad at some point who's high and then gets Teddy to smoke with him, and there's a moment where Teddy mentions Fred, and you can tell there's something not right about their relationship. I don't think they mention a mum, like, so it's all left to the imagination what actually goes on in these kids' lives. And obviously I've said, woe is me, middle class privileged white kids. Everyone still has their problems, right? I think the issue is we don't really, it's hard. Is it an issue? Is it done well? We don't really get to see the issues. So would that have benefited from it, or are we best to just leave that to the imagination? But you have that, and then you have April, who's had this sort of like groomed relationship. You have Teddy, who's like has the hit and run, and then tries to rebuild himself, but still has Fred dancing around him and that kind of thing. Then Emily was so fascinating, because I really think this whole problem with sort of like girls of that age is this want to impress other guys, and this is obviously for heteronormative relationships, but like want to impress guys, so they sleep with them or do other sexual favors, and then they're immediately rejected because the boys don't value girls who will give that up easily. But she continues to do it because she's stuck in the cycle, right? She'd rather be the girl that pleases the guy for 5 minutes than the invisible girl, and that's so heartbreaking. And I just feel like I would have liked to have explored that story a little bit more, but I think they position her as that girl that we all know but don't know, which I think is quite smart, actually, when you think about it.
And I think that there's like enough breadcrumbs like to her character, whether it's the kind of thing about her blog and stuff like that the girls like mock at the beginning, and it is, you get this sense, and I think it is in Zoe Levin's performance as well, that like there's this kind of sadness always in her eyes, where it is just like this feeling that the character of Emily just wants to be loved, and like unfortunately she's got herself in a situation where she feels that the way to do that is to kind of sleep with these guys and kind of be used and abused. And like we even see it with like Teddy at the beginning, when he basically like he can't fess up to the feelings that he has for April, so he just uses like Emily basically and I do think that like one of the things that this film does quite well is kind of captures that loneliness, that it doesn't matter what kind of social strata you're in at school, like for all intents and purposes these kids look like they're in like the in crowd, or at least like they're a part of a crowd. Do you know what I mean? There's a kind of vibrant group of friends and stuff like that. There's a lot of them, but still it just like through small moments, whether it's April kind of in the pool and stuff like that, like when they're bitching about Emily and stuff, you just really feel that lonely. And I like it's something I can relate to, like especially like being a teenager, where it's that thing of like, I'm surrounded by these people, I think everyone likes me, but I still feel lonely. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't like. I don't,
Yeah. And it's like, it's interesting with that kind of age group. And I think this is what the film does really well. None of them are being themselves. All of them are being who they think they should be. And I think April's probably the one that's furthest away from that. But yeah, I don't know. You have that conversation with her and Teddy at the end where he's like, you just don't care about anything. And she's like, I wish that I didn't care about anything. So it's kind of implies that she kind of, rather than puts on a front, she just detaches herself from everybody. And I think that's probably why she does end up with the teacher, because she kind of feels heard by someone for the first time. Like, she kind of speaks to those two girls a lot, but then like that scene where she's crying in the bathroom and they're just chatting away, I kept expecting the camera to go out to a wide shot of the bathroom of her just sitting there crying and them having completely ignored her and just chatted around, because I feel like that is the kind of thing that would, I don't know, just hammer home that message for her, that she's there and she's accepted, but she isn't being herself either, because she's not being anybody. So you could argue that there's that. But when you said about the pool scene, I think that is the most relatable thing I've ever felt coming from a girls' school. Hearing someone say, oh my God, did you know that Emily has a blog? And then them ripping it to shit, that is pulled fully from reality. That just happened all the time. So the fact that I have a podcast now is, from real strength and courage. Because if I'd have had one when I was a teenager, my God, I would not have any friends. Because everyone would have. But they do it to tear each other down, right? They do it because they're not confident in themselves. It's an epidemic in teenagers. And I think that's what they're trying to get at, but maybe in a more arty, subtle, experiential way.
Yeah.
That I don't know. It doesn't miss the mark, but it doesn't really drive it. It doesn't really home run it either.
Well, yeah, it kind of doesn't have the backbone to to be a film, like I mentioned, like Kids, which like will go to the like.
It's just missing that impact.
Well, yeah, it's missing like going full, like we're going to make an 18 here and we're going to do a no hold bars. This is what it's like to be a teenager. It might be amped up a little bit, but there's going to be like some, do you know what I mean? Some really gnarly shit. And you're going to, you're going to unfortunately see these things that are kind of whispered about in this film. But like, but in the next breath, like it kind of, it makes the film have this kind of sinister edge throughout all of it.
It does. Like, because it's like a dream, isn't it? It's like, it's not reality. It's presented to you as if it's some sort of weird dream. Maybe that's on purpose, because a lot of these kids feel like they're kind of not really in reality, because they're kind of just, I don't know, going from one football practice to the next party to crashing their car, and it's all just on the same line. There's no ebb and flow to their life. There's no ups and downs. It's just is. And so maybe if we interpret it, it could actually be quite impactful. But then again, I'm like, are we really giving it loads of credit? And actually,
no, like, because looking at the kind of critical response for this, a lot of people, like their criticisms like towards it are kind of the fact that people see it as like, it is quite like a vapid film. Do you know what I mean? And it is just kind of another portrayal of privileged teenagers with nothing new to say to the matter. And it like, people said like it hasn't got the kind of like insight and heart that like, and it's probably a tough one for Gia as well, kind of tiptoeing very closely behind Sophia, who kind of very much plays in a very similar ballpark. Do you know what I mean? Like,
her space.
This kind of, and these tales of the rich and famous or the privileged. Do you know what I mean? Whether you look at something like Somewhere or The Bling Ring, which would have come out, like The Bling Ring would have came out the same year as this, which like they're kind of they're very much like
I've seen comparisons,
sister films, or an auntie and a niece of a film, shall we say? But yeah, I think I think like like my general feelings towards it is like it's okay. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like it's nowhere near as hard hitting as certain films that tackle very similar issues are, and it's nowhere near as kind of life affirming as other films. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. A film I kept thinking about whilst watching this was The Perks of Being a Wallflower. I'm not sure if you've ever seen that.
Ah,
That
interesting.
kind of like
Yeah.
tackles like some. Do you know what I mean? Like that, there's a kind of a real.
Yeah, and also in a very subtle way, in a way that's more palatable, but you do understand the serious nature of what's happened. And I think the fact that it's fed to you in a way that isn't slapping you around the face, again, makes it feel so much more sinister, because you kind of, over time, towards the end, realize what had happened. You're like, oh God. And I think you can draw the comparisons between the way that they reveal that with the way that the Emily stuff is shot.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, and I think it's interesting you said about this film kind of, it's not bad, but it's not going up here like this, and it's not doing this like this. I feel like it just kind of sits in the middle of, and you can say, oh, Perks of Being Wallflower here, Bling Ring here, like other bits and pieces here. I even thought about like Dazed and Confused as well, because obviously just following these kids who are just having a party, you know, blah, blah, blah. You just follow them around for that whole evening. They all seem to have something that is just a bit more of a spark in some way. I think, unfortunately, this just kind of withers a little bit, but that's its appeal for some people, is that it is dreamlike and it's very aesthetic and very leaning on the fact that it doesn't do a lot. But I don't know, like, I feel like it kind of just, there's just something missing.
Well, yeah, I think it's kind of like between a pillar and a post, really, with kind of coming of age, like comedy, like, or like drama being here. Like, do you know what I mean? That are a lot more fun, and then like kind of hard hitting.
Or like, there's an actual clear arc.
Yeah, exactly.
With
or
coming
like
of age, right? You have the person before the story happened and after, but I think that's what I was going to mention to you earlier as well, is that I get this whole slice of life thing, but generally they still do focus around some sort of transformative event. And I think that maybe the reason this kind of suffers is because they are short stories. So what's happened is, whilst a short story has an arc over a shorter period of time, it's then been translated into a plot point within a bigger thing. So it's kind of just these tiny little plot beats that don't really go anywhere. That being said, I think Teddy has the arc in this, even if he's not the main character.
Yeah, well, Gia Coppola says that her, like the way she sees the film, like her main protagonists are Teddy and April, and the kind of the main thread throughout the whole film for her is all about like whether they can like come together and like
find
that
each
kind
other.
of like weird like kind of ships in the night situation, and it's kind of
like, you remember the scene where they finally see each other like halfway through the film, because they just don't interact. They interact right at the beginning, and then they do their own thing, and I think like sort of maybe the middle towards the end, not right at the end, but they just see each other at school, and he gives her like a sweet, like a frutella or something. They have no conversation, and they're just like, okay, see you around. And it's just like, you guys are so similar, you have no idea, but you just won't speak to each other. And I guess that's just one of those things they've tried to say, like, teenagers.
What are they like?
You know?
Yeah, they don't know how good they've got it until they don't have it, right? And
it's
like they have to go through all this turmoil to realize. And I think, I don't know.
Yeah,
I think there's like some.
Maybe that's the point.
There's some symbolic stuff in this film, whether it's like the heart that's carved into the tree, and then we get that scene that I imagine they don't show you all of it because they couldn't, for budgetary reasons, actually cut down a tree. So, but like when kind of Fred and Teddy cut down that tree, it's kind of, it is that thing of like, I don't know, like trying to that negative influence that Fred has on Teddy, that like that tree like is a kind of symbolic representation of something that Teddy could have, but he's got this kind of negative influence in his life who, no matter how much he tries, like he kind of whether it's through his probation, working at the library and trying to help out and stuff like that. He's got.
I love that when they're like, he's like, I really like it here, and they're like, well, we really like you. Like, you can see he's a very sweet kid. He just hangs around the wrong.
And like, there are some like moments in this film that I really love. I like one in particular. I love the moments when he's in the life drawing classes and the kind of like pearls of wisdom that the
art
teacher gives him. And I particularly love this one just because it feels like a knowing reference to another Coppola family member and a film series that one of them was in.
You remind me of Sylvester Stallone.
What?
Yeah, he's a very good artist.
Underneath all that muscle, you know, he's a very smart dude. And you know, he wrote Rocky. I mean, he wrote all 4 of Rocky. I mean, that dude's smart.
And by that, it's a reference to Talia Shire, who features in this film. So, yeah, we're kind of like, I just wanted to read out, there is a handy...
she features in Palo Alto?
Yeah, she plays the like guidance counselor who, like, very briefly...
Of course! Oh my god, I see it now. I didn't see it before.
Yeah, who kind of just like...
Oh, amazing.
Like, says you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And we also get the voice of the man himself, Francis Ford Coppola, who delivers this.
Mr. Morrison, this is the second time you've been before the court. Given the support you have from your family, from the school, and the community, the court would like to give you one last chance to turn your life around. In lieu of commitment, you shall be placed on probation for a period of 12 months on the following terms and conditions. 1. You shall perform 150 hours of community service at the Children's Library. Given your demonstrated talent as an artist and painter, I think you'll do quite well there. 2. You must make a formal and in-person apology to Mrs. Grossman, the victim of your offense and whose car you hit. Mr. Morrison, if you fail to complete your community service hours, or if you engage in any further criminal conduct of any sort, your probation will be revoked and you will be committed to juvenile hall. All right, thank you and good luck.
This feels like a perfect time for me to read out something that somebody has handily put on the IMDb trivia for this film, which is basically a list of all of the nepotism in this film. So, the director and many cast members are related to famous Hollywood people. Gia Coppola, Talia Shire, Bailey Coppola are part of the Coppola family. Jack Kilmer is the son of co-star Val Kilmer and actress Joanne Whaley. Nat Fox is the son of actress Polly Draper. Emma Roberts is the daughter of Eric Roberts and niece of Julia Roberts. Jacqueline de la Fonte is Gia Coppola's mother, who plays April's mum in the film.
Right, okay.
And used to be married to the Getty family. Alanta de Cabernet Taylor is the daughter of John Taylor and Amanda de Cadenet. Anna Fia Bogdanovich is sister of the late great director Peter Bogdanovich. Emily Gretzky is the daughter of co-star Janet Jones and hockey legend Wayne Gretzky. Jessie Jo Stark.
No way.
So Jessie Jo Stark is Cher's goddaughter. Christian Madsen is the son of Michael Madsen and the nephew of Virginia Madsen. Co-star Jessica Ellie Taylor and Brendan Taylor are siblings. Mika Nelson is siblings with 5 other actors and a visual effects artist. Marshall Bell is married to 4-time Oscar winner Melania Canonero. Margaret Qualley is the daughter of Andy McDowell.
I remember seeing her.
Who plays Raquel, the girl who Mr. B is having dalliances with as well.
And the other babysitter.
And Keegan Allen is the son of Philip R. Allen, and James Franco is the son of Betsy Franco and brother of Dave. Franco.
Madness. Is there anyone that didn't have a connection working in that
So
film? It's like you needed, like there's that celebrity dating app where you have to like be, connected to. Is it like that but a film version?
I think there's an element of it because like some of it is quite sweet in regards to like how much of like a family affair this is. Like the behind the scenes like footage is filmed by it's filmed by Gia Coppola's mum, who obviously, as I said, like plays April's mum in the film, and some of the sets for this as well is actually Val Kilmer and Jacqueline Getty's house. Like they just used their own houses, and a lot of the kids stayed at Gia Coppola's mum's house, and she would cook for them and stuff like that. Like it was a real
really
tight
sweet.
crew and kind of.
Do you know what it feels like? It feels like Gia's gone, right, guys, I'm ready to make my first feature film. And they've gone, don't worry, we'll call up the friends, get their kids involved. That's basically what
There's
happened,
an element
right?
of that, and obviously, like you would have thought, like when this was kind of in the script stage and like early production and stuff like that, like scripts would have been passed to Francis, they would have been passed to Sophia. Do you know what I mean? There would have been like a kind of a round table or whatever of them discussing, like, hey, like, do you know what I mean? Like a kind of Godfather-esque scene where it's like, she wants to be a part of the family. Like, let's kind of have a look at this script and stuff like that. And the nepotism doesn't even end there. So, like, when it comes to the music of this film, we've got Devonte Hines, who has no relation to anyone in this film, but does a fantastic job. A lot of people may know him as being Blood Orange or Lightspeed Champion, or way back in the day was in a band called Test Icicles. It's a fantastic like artist in his own right. I'm a massive fan. But the other person who contributes to this soundtrack is Robert Schwartzman, so Jason Schwartzman's younger brother. And there's also a track on the soundtrack by Coconut Records, which is just Jason Schwartzman under his like kind of music making moniker.
It's like they have a Coppola WhatsApp and they're like, guys, Gia's making a film. Who wants to be involved with this one? They'll be like, yeah, I'm around. I can't act though because I'm not around for long enough, but I'll do a track. And it's just like everyone like pitching in somehow, which, as you say, is quite sweet.
Yeah, and I know that like when this was when first like developing everything and kind of how she was going to work it out, what stories she was going to use, was kind of told, well, just adapt the different stories that you like write them into scripts, and then kind of just make them with your friends. And she kind of did that to begin with, and then kind of worked out what worked, what didn't work, and then kind of molded it into the final script that we see in the film, which I think is a fascinating way of going about it, right?
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. Definitely a good one to for the podcast, given sort of the theming of it. Definitely a good one to discuss.
So I mentioned the music there. What do you think to the music in this film? Do you think it's affecting or effective in what it's trying to do?
So I always talk about this. I'm quite terrible with music. Like I feel it. I don't necessarily hear and remember it. But I really like the music in this. I'm going to listen back to the score actually afterwards, because I feel like aesthetically everything about this is very dreamlike, as we've mentioned, and I like having that atmospheric kind of music. So yeah, I definitely think it drives home that sort of melancholic, but still it's interesting because even the way that it's shot, it's kind of like a bit hazy, and there's like at some points pink tints and blue tints, not proper heavy, but you can feel this sort of like colouring. And I just feel like the music 100% just fit there. Basically, if I'd have watched this when I was doing film production at uni, I 100% would have taken it and ran with it and done some sort of like project just lifting this style and completely. So in that aspect, is very much.
Yeah, I love the score. It's like a lot of like kind of really subtle strings and a lot of synth strings and stuff like that. That kind of
Yeah, lots of
and it's like there's just notes that will appear that like have a darker edge to it that reminded me somewhat of the kind of the score to Twin Peaks, and it kind of, I don't know, it reminded me somewhat of that, I guess, in the kind of subject matter of you don't really know what a teenager's getting up to and stuff like that, and like what's what.
That should be the tagline for this film.
Oh, those pesky kids, you don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Did you spot a reference to a Sofia Coppola film in this film, Daisy?
Oh, no, I didn't.
So,
you're going to tell me and I'm going to be like, duh.
April has a Virgin Suicides poster in her bedroom.
I did see that. I did. I just forgot about it. See, I told you.
You see Kirsten Dunst's eyes just kind of like peering at you.
Yeah, it's like in the WhatsApp group, Sophia's like, listen, I'm so busy, but you can have a poster.
Please. I think it's probably sweeter than that. I imagine Gia probably grew up like idolizing her cool auntie.
I think that's probably her, like, her tribute to Sophia, because I imagine as much as she probably worships the altar of her granddad, like, I think being a woman and having a woman's voice in the industry, and clearly she takes a lot of influence from Sophia's style as well. Yeah, 100%. That was definitely
have you seen Mainstream yet? Her newest film, which
no, I haven't. I haven't heard great things.
No, neither have I. But
no. But I'm intrigued to see it because I think although we were saying about some of the issues that this film has, like ultimately there was a lot to like about it, and I'd rather. And we sort of discussed earlier as well about sort of like films that are dull. I'd much rather watch stuff that's different and got some style to it, and it's got something to say, even if it's not obvious. So I do want to check that out, and I love Andrew Garfield.
And I think
no brainer.
I think the fact that, like, realistically, there possibly would have been 6 years between those films being made. That like it's not like she kind of got out of the gate and then people were like, just have loads of money. Like it seems like she had to kind of like, I don't know, like do what? Yeah. Which is probably like, it probably comes down to the fact as well that if she was a male member of the family, or like or not even that the family have that much like swing. Like Francis Ford Coppola is like constantly on the kind of verge of bankruptcy with every decision he makes.
That's true. Yeah, because I saw something earlier that said, a reflection of our culture is that they'd rather pay to have a mini series about the making of the Godfather rather than give the director money to make another film.
Yeah, because that's one of the rare films he doesn't own. Like a lot of them, and his production company, which I believe now kind of Sophia and Roman kind of own, is American Zoetrope, and they produced this film as well. So there very much is the heart of the Coppola family like beating throughout this film.
It's got the stamp on it.
It's got that mark of approval. Before we start to wrap this up, is there anything that we've kind of missed about this film that you kind of wanted to talk about at all, Daisy?
I just really love Teddy's character, and I looked actually, and I was like, I wonder if Jack Kilmer's been in anything else, and he has, but not anything else I've seen. I don't know if you've seen him in anything else, but I just think he was a really sweet character in this. And like, you could argue, some people would be like, oh, we didn't really have much to do, but it was more about the subtleties, like you say. In this, he clearly was a very sweet boy, but just sort of like encouraged by the wrong kind of people, which happens. Like that's what they're trying to say. But I'd really like to maybe check out some more of his stuff that he's done. And now I just want, especially with the trend on Twitter of nepotism, I just want one big Hollywood family tree. Just so we can all clear up everything.
Who's related to who?
We all know who's come from where.
Well, I've made it for the Coppola family, and that took me fucking ages, so I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it for the whole of Hollywood, because it would be...
Maybe if everyone takes a family and then we all like come together, we can build like a tapestry or something.
It would be as evil as the tapestries in Midsummer. Do you know what I mean? These kind of demonic pagan tapestries of evil.
Well, it is Hollywood.
So as we start to wrap things up, one of the questions I like to ask people is, Is there any Coppola connections in this film? Are there people who have worked with members of the family elsewhere in their career? Did you manage to find any, Daisy?
I mean, probably, but
I've
they've all escaped me now.
I've got a load, so I'll rattle off a few, and then we can
Go on.
dig into ones that are interesting.
And then I'll go, oh yeah, of course, I forgot that one. Yes, like to every single
No,
one.
some of them are quite like either uncredited stuff
Obscure.
or like depending on which cut of the
Brilliant.
film you see, this person is in it. So
Sure.
let's get them out of the way. James Franco starred in the only film that Nick Cage has ever directed, Sonny, and has a cameo and a hint to a sequel of The Wicker Man, depending on which cut you see. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
There is a scene at the end of, it doesn't spoil The Wicker Man, but there's a scene at the end of a certain cut where it's like, you see characters like, are they going to do what they've done again? And James Franco's kind of the person they're setting up. And he also appears in The Green Hornet, which we talked about last week on the podcast, which was DOP'd by John Schwartzman. Val Kilmer was in Bad Lieutenant alongside Nicolas Cage. Let's do this one. This is a long one. Jacqueline Delafontaine, who is Gia Coppola's mother, is in Francis Ford Coppola's Jack and Gia Coppola's Mainstream. She also worked as a costume designer on Christopher Coppola's Deadfall, Sofia Coppola's short film Lick the Star, and Eleanor Coppola's latest film Love is Love is Love, and was a wardrobe assistant on The Godfather Part 3. So she's very much benefited from the Coppola family, which
oh, for sure. Yeah.
And yeah, it would be remiss not to mention, like, there's like, so Gia's dad, Giancarlo Coppola, like died in the late 80s in a kind of tragic boating accident.
Oh, okay.
So like,
wow.
Yeah, it's kind of beautiful because he was being like, almost like the baton was going to be passed from Francis to him. He was basically training him to become a director, and then like as I said, tragically passed away. So it's beautiful in a way to see Gia kind of pick up that mantle,
and Sophia as well. Yeah, like obviously the women of the family, when it usually go to the firstborn male. I don't know if he's the firstborn.
He was the firstborn male. Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
Bailey Coppola, who plays one of the kids at the party, is in Sofia Coppola.
Yeah, where's Bailey Coppola on the tree?
So Bailey Coppola is Nicolas Cage's nephew. So he is Christopher Coppola's son.
Okay.
So he is
Okay.
And you like, if you Google a picture of him, you will see that he's like the spit of Nicolas Cage.
When you close your eyes, do you see this family tree?
Somewhat. I like.
Is it like burnt into your retinas?
I have said many times I am basically like Charlie in that episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Oh my god!
With the string and the like pinboard.
We need to talk about the mail. We need to talk about the Coppolas.
That's me. Yeah. So Bailey Coppola is in his dad's film Sacred Blood and is in A Score to Settle, playing a younger version of Nicolas Cage's character. One more and then we're done. Colleen Camp, who plays the lady who Teddy crashes into, was played a playmate in Apocalypse Now, so plays like a dancing girl.
Oh,
is in Nicolas Cage's first film he ever starred in, Valley Girl, and is in A Glimpse Inside the Mind of Charles Swan III, which was directed by Roman Coppola, as well as being in Mainstream, directed by our girl.
Wow.
Gia Coppola.
Amazing. What a web. What a web of talent.
I love it. There probably is more, but I don't know. I always toy with the idea of dropping that section because it's just me rattling off a load of weird facts and people are just probably at home.
No, but I enjoyed it.
So let's rate this film. Let's kind of figure out whether people should watch this. So the way we rate films on this podcast, Daisy, is we always ask what would be the perfect wine pairing for this film.
Well, I thought about this And I felt like the perfect wine pairing for this. And I'll tell you, and rather than just like a specific name, I'll kind of give just a bit more of a feel about the vibe. A cheap rosé that looks expensive with a cigarette or maybe some weed.
I reckon, yeah. Or you could
and maybe a shot of something
you
as
could
well.
definitely pair this with a can, not a glass, a can of the Gia Coppola wine. There is a Gia Coppola wine you can buy, and you can get it in a kind of like a Marks and Spencer's tin kind of.
Oh my god, I really want to try it.
Pack. Yeah.
Yes, 100%. But sitting there like Emma Roberts, drinking the wine out the can with a cigarette that she's not smoking at all. Yeah, wonderful. And finish it off with a splash in a pool, because swimming pools seem to feature quite heavily.
It's Palo Alto. There's got to be swimming pools. I'm sure there's one in every garden.
You know.
So would that wine be a bottom shelf, middle shelf, or top shelf wine? AKA, is this film any good?
I mean, you don't usually get cans of wine on the top shelf, but this is Gia Coppola wine, so I would say it's a top shelf film, because the things that it's missing on is all up to interpretation. I feel, and although it's meandering and stuff, I think maybe I didn't enjoy it as much this time because I knew what was going to happen. I wasn't necessarily in the headspace to watch a film like that. I didn't think, I want to watch Palo Alto. I watched it for the podcast. And the more we talk about it, the more I kind of do want to revisit it again and also get other people's opinions. So I'm going to be bold and I'm going to say top shelf.
Yeah, I'm waiting for maybe in the next couple of years, as it hits its 10-year anniversary, we might start to get some kind of retrospective looks at it and stuff like that. I like kind of trying to scour the internet and kind of trying to find people, especially speaking about it in the light of kind of everything that happened with.
Well, it's just personal, isn't it? You know, the whole point of this film is look at what's happening to even the most privileged of teenagers. In fact, the fact that they are privileged means that they are doing these things because they're just like no connection to anything what's going on. The fact that the guy that wrote the story and is in it has done exactly what the guy in the film does, is just hammers that point home even more.
One thing I forgot to mention, and I think that is like pertinent to mention, is the fact, like, the way that this film handles like the kind of flirtations with abuse, because sometimes it's not actually like abuse hasn't happened, or the way it handles abuse, this film, not even just the kind of like the hint at abuse, is like, and I think through the characters is really fascinating in the way that it kind of like Teddy tells Fred about his dad basically trying it on with him, like, which is a very like kind of skin crawling and you can like as an audience you're like, this is so inappropriate. Do you know what I mean? The moment he says like, I'm gonna come sit next to you, like, it's kind of like red flag.
Yeah, it just
but like the way that is kind of shrugged off, and throughout the film it's kind of abuse is weirdly, and it feels like it's conscious on Gia Coppola's part, even the way she frames that Emily thing, where it's like that but it captures that aspect of people who go through this, and kind of, especially when you,
because they don't know until they're adults that it was abuse, right? Like 100%.
Exactly.
And even like with April's character, her getting jealous about the attention that he gives Raquel, and the fact that she gets really pissed off when she finds out that he's sleeping with her as well.
There's like,
I think
there's a really tiny moment when he first kisses her, and there's a smile she does, and like, it's really quick, and then like it cuts, and it's like it doesn't look like a sweet. It looks sinister. Do you know what I mean? It's like she kind of like, I don't know. It's like a devilishness to it, where it's like, I know that something, like, she almost knows something's wrong. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like a
yeah, but she likes it, so it's like, and I think that's something that we maybe didn't actually like sort of verbalize, is that all of this is done in such a way that although you said about the whole kids thing, like, it was a lot more sort of specific and like hard hitting and stuff. Maybe the whole point of this film is that it is normalized and it's told through the eyes of teenagers who just think this stuff is normal. Like they drink, they do drugs, they drive under the influence, they sexually assault each other, you know, and this is all happening. And when I say it like that in a list, you would think, what the hell is this film? But it's done in such a aesthetically pleasing way that it's really interesting. Now we've mentioned it. Oh yeah, no, that was the point. 100%.
Yeah, and it kind of the film has that sheen of like a kind of a teenage memory, and especially encapsulating that time when like you guess where the fact that they're driving and stuff like that they're probably like 16, 17 years old. So it is very much on that cusp of becoming an adult as well, and that push pull of like wanting to get rid of childish things and wanting to be an adult, but at the same time, like you're not quite ready for it. And like arguments like even in your mid-20s, like pushing your 30s, you're still not ready for adult shit, as I can attest to. So yeah, like I think it's a fascinating film, and I'd definitely say this is like a middle shelf wine, but it's very much like do you know what I mean? It's on the periphery to a top shelf.
For sure. Yeah, it's not like, you know, top shelf.
Yeah, you're not getting that little that little stall out to do you know what I mean? You're not asking a supermarket attendant to.
You can reach it. It's reachable.
Perfect. Yeah.
But you might need to go on your tiptoes a little bit.
As I said, as I like to use a restaurant analogy, you're not turning over the page if you're ordering this wine in a restaurant. It's kind of still on the first page. It's not that expensive.
Definitely.
So let's move on to some impossible questions. And the first one is, which Coppola family member would you keep? But in doing so, you get rid of the entire filmographies of the entire rest of the family.
Oh, this is such a tough one because obviously, like, first of all, I'm terrible and there's so many films that I haven't seen. So I feel like whenever this sort of stuff comes up, I'm like, oh God, I wish that I had seen like a lot more to make a proper decision, so to speak. Whilst I do love what I've seen of Sophia, she was my first thought. I just can't get rid of The Godfathers. Sorry. I'm film bro, 100%. I've got a Back to the Future, Star Wars, and Pulp Fiction posters. I am your poster film bro. And sorry, a lot of the people that I know shit on The Godfather, but because it's just an obvious. But I just love it. I think it's just masterful cinema, and I just can't get rid of it. So. And Apocalypse Now is amazing as well. So maybe I need to watch more Francis Ford Coppola films. But of those alone, I can't. But what I was going to say to you earlier is when I was considering this, I was like, but if I get rid of Spike Jonze, does that mean I get rid of the Jackasses?
I reckon you just get rid of you get rid of those lavish intros for the Jackass movies, because I think they're the things he first-hand directs. So you get rid of the shopping cart.
And if we can get rid of the sections where he pretends to be old woman, I don't find that funny. So they can go. Fine. All right. Then I'm happy with my decision.
Perfect. Funnily enough, I said last week, I always toy with the idea of covering the Jackass movies on this podcast because of the Spike Jonze connection.
Because of the superfluous connection. I mean, you're gonna run out of films at some point. You've got to find somewhere else.
Oh yeah, and like I always loved the fact that Sophia and Spike were married, and she obviously like met a load of the Jackass guys, because Chris Pontius turns up in Somewhere, and Johnny Knoxville, I believe, is in Mainstream as well, a film that. Yeah.
What? Okay, I've got to watch it now.
So
I didn't know that.
I think the Jackass.
Unless he says, "I am Johnny Knoxville and this is Mainstream," I'm not interested.
If he doesn't, that's how I'm going to introduce that episode.
Yeah, I completely screwed up that quote, by the way. I'm a new Jackass fan, so sorry to all the old school ones. Don't worry, but I'm still getting used to, like, you know, being a fan.
As a representative of those old school fans, we forgive you, Daisy. Don't worry. So, based on this film alone, are the Coppolas the greatest film family of all time?
I think I'm going to have to say yes. Like, come on. Like, as a collective, like, just look at the power that they have and the influence. And basically, I think that they're trying to just take over the world at this point. They're just like spawning, you know, all over the place. Kind of like Alien. They're just laying all the eggs. And then we'll just get generations and generations of Coppolas. And one day there will purely be a Hollywood subsector that is just Coppola spawn. It will be a very very specific club, elitist, so to speak.
What's fascinating about them, though, is with Francis, like, he almost operates outside of the Hollywood system, because Zoetrope is based in San Francisco, so even geographically, it's kind of it's like out in the Napa Valley and stuff like that.
Maybe, well, there you go. Maybe San Francisco's the new Hollywood.
There we go. Well, let's move on to possibly the most important question on this podcast, and that is, what does Bill Murray say to Scarlett Johansson at the end of Lost in Translation?
Well, I read, and I think it makes sense, and in my head it is canon since I read it, is something like, I have to be leaving now, but I won't let that come between us. Okay.
You can have that.
So I read that, and I've read other stuff as well, but I think that's the one that most people think it is. And I don't know, it just feels like, even the way it's like written, and to be honest, someone could have just made it up and made it sound like Bill Murray, but that sounds like Bill Murray. And one day I will watch it back and be like squinting at the screen, trying to work out what he's saying, which I'm sure many people have done. And maybe that's how they got to that one. But I think for me, that's canon. I'm happy with that. Works with the story.
Most people use it as an opportunity to do like an anti-Disney joke or something. So it's a breath of fresh air. Someone's done their research to actually find out what possibly could have been said.
No, I'm full on. No, facts all the way. Facts all the way. I'm sorry. I'm so like, I've got like two brain cells like rubbing together at this point. I can't be creative.
No worries. No worries. It's the first time we've had that answer. So yeah, I look for.
Well, there you go. That's how I'm different. Is I just come with the straight.
I look forward to when I eventually cover that film, just doing a super cut of all of them together, which will take me fucking ages, but will probably be a lot of fun.
Oh my god, yeah. That would be
fun. And a reminder to people listening as well, if you rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts, tell us what you think Bill Murray says to Scarlett Johansson at the end of Lost in Translation in your 5-star review. That's
there you go. Add more work for you.
With that plug out of the way, it's time for you, Daisy, to plug yourself. Where can people find W Rated? Where can people find you if they want to hear your opinions on films and what you're up to?
And I'm sure that they would love my opinions. Just kidding. So I'm on Twitter as Daisy Vic Edwards, Instagram Daisy Victoria Edwards, and Letterboxd as well is Daisy Victoria Edwards. And then for W Rated, it's at W Rated Pod on Twitter and Instagram, I believe, and then W Rated as it's spelled for Letterboxd.
Perfect. I would say to people to 100% check out W Rated. It's a fantastic podcast in the way that you kind of delve into these terrible films, but it never feels mean or kind of like I don't know. It could be so easy to, especially like you get a lot of like.
We don't like to kick a dog when it's down.
Exactly, you get a lot of.
You know, if you're already on the bottom 100, you're on the dregs.
Yeah, exactly. You're very much that kind of like. Picking up that drunk person who's at the bar and kind of being like, we'll see you through this. We'll make sure you get in a taxi and go home to your bed.
I love that.
Yeah, that's the vibe of W Rate.
I love it. Thank you. That's what we aim for. We don't want to kick a dog when it's down. We want to find out why people hate these films. And sometimes, don't get me wrong, we hate them too. but we work out why at least.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming and making some Coppola connections with me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
we have it, guys. A massive thank you once again to Daisy Edwards for joining me. And if you're not checking out W-Rated, then what the fuck are you doing with your life? If you enjoyed this episode, or if you felt like we might have missed anything with this film, or kind of, I don't know, how did I handle the subject matters of this film? Was this a good one to cover? Like, I'm always up for learning and growing, and tell me if I'm wrong. So you can get a hold of me on all the socials, which is cagedinpod. Gmail.com is the email. I don't know why I just said that, but yeah, it's at cagedinpod on all the socials. So that's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Letterboxd. See, look, I'm talking about learning and growing. I'm just showing you that I'm a fallible human being. I just made a mistake right then. So yeah, if you want to drop me an email, do so. If you want to ever drop me an email, you ever want to, I love hearing from you guys, not just praise and stuff like that, but just expanding the conversation. And one of the ways you can expand the conversation, and if you want to support this podcast because you enjoy it in any way, is heading over to patreon.com/cagedinpod, where right now you can get access to the brand spanking new season over there, Movie Brat Bros, where in the first season we are going all the way through the films of Brian De Palma. So far we've got 3 episodes out, one to drop this coming Thursday, which will be a conversation with Mark Searby and Matt Brothers all about Carlito's Way, so you don't want to miss that one. As for next week on the podcast, I am joined by, I guess, like the prince of podcasting, at least in film podcasting. It's the fantastic Mike Munzer from, I'm sure you're aware, the Evolution of Horror podcast, which is by far like a kind of staple of British and global podcasting. Like Mike's done so much. He recently did a like sanctioned Scream podcast with former guest Anna Bogutskaya and Louise Blaine, all about the Scream franchise, which is again fantastic. And it was a pleasure to talk to Mike all about a 1990s Dimension Films movie called Night Watch, starring Ewan McGregor, Josh Brolin, Nick Nolte, and our Coppola connection for that episode, the always lovely Patricia Arquette. I've already sold you the Patreon, so if you don't want to part with your cash, one of the ways that you can support this podcast is heading over to Apple Podcasts, Acast, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this right now, leaving a lovely 5-star rating and a review. In your review, as always, I want to hear what you think Bill Murray said to Scarlett Johansson at the end of Lost in Translation. And any of my favourite ones will get read out on the podcast. So, as always, guys, I've been Petros Patsilivas. I've been your handy guide through the crazy world of the Coppola family tree. Remember to keep it caged in, and I'll catch you next time.